today's episode. It's a topic that I hear about all the time from stepmoms. It's a little bit controversial, but it is something that we really could use more information from expert sources. So I brought one of the top experts.
I'm Cameron. I spent years building my career and creating a life I loved. And when my Prince Charming finally showed up, he had 4 kids in tow. Fast forward through lots of mistakes made and lessons learned, stepfamily life was much more complicated than I realized. If you're looking for help with blended family life, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stepmom Diaries, where we keep it real as we dish about all the things. This is your weekly dose of blended family inspiration and encouragement. You're not the wicked stepmother, so let me help you find your fairy tale ending. Come on, let's do this.
Welcome. I am so excited about today's episode. This is a topic that I hear about all the time from stepmoms. And it's something that there are a lot of misconceptions around. And it's a buzzword, but it's a little bit controversial in court settings. But we really could use more information from expert sources. So I brought one of the top experts in this area today. Dr. Amy Baker is one of the foremost experts in parental alienation, and she also happens to be a speaker at this year's Stepmom Summit, and those tickets are for free. It is online. It's going to be a full week of live sessions, including one with Dr. Amy Baker. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can just go to thestepmomsummit.com and grab your spot so you get your free ticket as soon as they become available. It is September 14th through the 18th. So, Dr. Baker has a PhD in developmental psychology. She is the author or co-author of 10 books and over 120 articles on topics related to children of divorce, children's well-being, and high conflict divorce. And these books include The Adult Children of Parental Alienation, Parenting Under Fire, and Surviving Parental Alienation. She is enormously respected throughout the field and brings in so much knowledge. And we have a fantastic conversation in store for you today. I think you're really going to find it interesting. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Dr. Baker, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. This is a discussion I've been wanting to have for a very long time.
Happy to be here.
I have to tell my stepmoms that are listening, if you have not bought this book, Dr. Baker's Adult Children of Parental Alienation Syndrome, it is a wonderful insight into everything that we're going to be talking about today. And Dr. Baker, you have spent decades researching all of this. For someone who's never heard the term parental alienation, and I think probably most of our listeners are familiar with the term, but for those who aren't, tell us quickly what it is.
It's a family dynamic in which one parent engages in behaviors intentionally or otherwise. It doesn't have to be completely conscious, but they're engaging in behaviors that are likely to foster the child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. So to be clear, not every situation in which a child rejects a parent is a situation involving alienation. Sometimes kids reject a parent for legitimate reasons. The parent is, just severely, challenged in parenting, or there's substance abuse, mental health issues, violence, all of those things. If a child is rejecting a parent for that reason, that is not alienation. So alienation is a subset of situations in which a child is rejecting a parent.
I'm so glad that you said that. And that's such an important point. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to get into how you know when it's happening. But the term parental alienation is become kind of contested, especially in the courts. And there are people that accept that, the harm behind it is real. But, how do you delineate, what it is and what it isn't? And talk about it with families when it's maybe not parental alienation,
Right. If your child's rejecting you, it's the best, most satisfying explanation. So it's clear that there are people whose kids are rejecting them who maybe deserve to be rejected or have done something, but it's easy to say, oh, I'm a victim of alienation, because then you don't really have to look at yourself. So that's kind of part of the problem, is that people who claim to be or believe that they are victims in an alienation dynamic, some of them truly are, and some of them might not be. The one thing I'll say to kind of balance that is That's true of everything. There's no, whether it's a medical condition or a mental health problem, there's always, what we call false positives, people who think they have the condition but don't. And the people who oppose alienation, who want to fight it in court, kind of latch onto that as if it were unique to this situation. But the truth is, not every case of sex abuse is actually a case of sex abuse. There are, situations where it might not actually have happened. That's why we have investigations, right? If every case of child abuse, was absolutely 100% child abuse, then we wouldn't need the whole child protection system. We wouldn't need forensic interviewing strategies to try to figure out whether it's true or not. But somehow with alienation, the idea that there are situations where somebody is falsely claiming that it's alienation when it's not has led certain people to want to just throw out the entire thing and say it's invalid or dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it could be invalid. I think it could be dangerous, but the solution in my mind is better diagnostic tools, not to say it never happens.
Yeah, and that's important to understand. And I think that in today's world, a lot of judges really don't want to touch it because it is often claimed and not justified, and it's really hard to prove and all that.
I'm not sure it's hard to prove if you know the 5-factor model. However, I agree it's a third rail in court for sure.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't really do that much research in this field anymore. The main thing I'm doing is coaching parents who are dealing with this, step-parents, parents, grandparents. And one of the things that I will coach my clients on is don't use the phrase parental alienation unless you need to. There are alternatives that aren't controversial, like, hey, I think maybe the other parent is interfering in my child's relationship with me. That is, in essence, what alienation is. And a lot of times that will satisfy your need to explain what's happening, whether it's to your child's therapist or the guidance counselor at school or the guardian ad litem, attorney for the minor child, mediator. It's all the mental health professionals and legal professionals that get involved. There's only one situation where you absolutely have to use the term parental alienation in court, but that is very rare. And most of the time, there are alternatives that will satisfy what you're trying to communicate without the baggage. Because the truth is, if you bring it up in court, the other side can actually file a motion to prevent an expert from talking about alienation. And then there's a whole hearing just on whether alienation is real or not. That has different names in different states. In some states, it's called a Fry hearing. In some, it's a Mohan. In some, it's a Daubert. In California, and in Canada, it's something else. And it's very hit or miss. Some judges are like, of course, this is real. I don't need to hear any more. And some, I've been involved in many of them. I've passed most, but once I didn't. And it was really just based on lies that the other side told, like Dr. Baker's only ever published one paper. And it's obvious I have 130 papers on my resume, but for some reason the judge was like, oh, well then alienation doesn't exist. And if you lose that hearing, then your whole case pretty much falls apart. So it's putting, to me, unnecessary weight on something that you don't need to, and with such a high risk. It's often not necessary.
That's such good advice. And I know so many stepmoms who are dealing with this challenge, whether it's actually parental alienation or whether it's interference. But I love the idea of, being able to be more impactful by calling it something different, at least where the court system is concerned. So I know that, we've talked a little bit about that it isn't always parental alienation, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. What are the common indicators? Like what should people look for to understand whether the other parent is engaging in that?
I'm trying to think about the best way to answer that question, because from a legal, diagnostic, clinical perspective, you really should be following the 5-factor model, which helps you determine whether a rejecting child is alienated or not. But if you're talking about parents who are like, gee, something's going on, my child just seems a little different, is this alienation? So you're kind of starting at a much different place. I would say the main thing to ask yourself is, does it seem that your child has distorted ideas about who you are and your intentions, because generally with alienation cases, the child starts saying things like, I don't need a father anyway, or, Coach Joe is more of a father to me than you ever were, which is could be true, but if it's not, then it's a distortion.
Yeah.
Another kind of early indicator is that your child doesn't trust you. They don't trust your intentions. So if you come 10 minutes late, it's because you don't love them. If you come 10 minutes early, you're stalking them. So there's a distortion in there, but the underlying distortion is that you are not trustworthy. You're not safe, loving, and available to your child. So it's like if you start to feel that, the first thing you need to do is say, am I doing something to induce this in my child? Am I being erratic? Am I being unkind? Am I being less available emotionally? And if you feel that your parenting is, the same good parenting that it's been, then I do think it's worth considering that the other parent is doing something to induce that in your child. That does not mean that you then accuse the other parent of alienation. That
Right.
never helps. And nor does it mean accusing the child of being alienated, because that doesn't make sense. So there's an internal process of, gee, what's going on? Am I inducing my child to be more hurt and angry with me? If so, let me change my parenting. If not, that's when you really need to start being more strategic in gathering your evidence, having a lawyer who maybe can help guide you, getting some parental alienation coaching to really kind of figure out how to navigate the situation.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 5 factors. Tell our listeners about the 5 factors.
Sure. I'm happy to. It's actually called the Baker model. We also call it the 5-factor model. It's based on primarily my research. And the model determines that if all 5 factors are present, then a rejecting child is alienated. If any one of them is not present, then it's not alienation. So, it's very science-based. It's been kind of recognized by experts. So the 5-factor models. Factor 1 is that there's a breach in the relationship. This is the only factor that everybody agrees on. Like, the child's not coming for visits. Maybe they're coming, but very reluctantly, and they spend the entire visit in the bedroom and won't come out and really be with you anymore. There is a breakdown, a serious, significant, not fleeting breakdown in the relationship. Factor 2, prior positive relationship between the child and the parent who's now being rejected. So that means that you've put in your time, you've spent time with this child, you've taken care of them, you're empathically attuned to them, you have a relationship with them. You can't, abandon the child for 10 years and then show up and say, oh, my child won't see me. It must be alienation. That doesn't make sense. There's no foundation of a relationship. Factor 3, absence of abuse or neglect, not allegations, because there's often allegations, but there has to be demonstrated abuse, neglect, or, really seriously deficient parenting that would cause a child to reject a parent. So if you've hit your child or, dramatically demeaned them, molested them, abandoned them, it's not alienation when your child then finally says, gee, I don't think I want to spend time with you anymore. Factor 4, evidence that the other parent is engaging in some, does not have to be all, there's no magic cutoff, some of the 17 primary parental alienation strategies. And these are behaviors that research has shown can foster a child's unjustified rejection of the other parent. So behaviors like, having the child keep secrets from the parent, spy on the parent. The parent is withholding information from the targeted parent. They're referring to the targeted parent by that parent's first name. So it would be like, Amy's here instead of mom's here. Referring to somebody else as mom or dad to kind of create this environment like there's this new family and that other person doesn't really count.
Yeah.
Removing photographs of them, interfering in communication, not sharing the child's cell phone number, blocking calls, gifts, etc. Obviously bad mouthing, convincing the child that the other parent is unsafe, doesn't love them. So that's just sort of a sprinkling of the 17 primary parental alienation strategies. You have to have evidence of them. So one of my kind of pet peeves when I'm training people in this model and putting together their documentation is you can't say, Amy, I know my ex is bad-mouthing me. And I'll say, really? How do you know? Well, what else could it be? My kids are mad at me all the time. So that's
Right.
an inference. That's not evidence, right? Because there could be other reasons why your child is mad at you all the time. It could be that the other parent is bad mouthing you, but there has to be evidence of that.
And I assume evidence would include the kid coming over and saying, mom says you're a bad parent. And mom says that, you know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could go down that road of how to put together your evidence, but I'm going to
Yeah.
just finish the model first. So factor 5 is the child is exhibiting the 8 behavioral manifestations of alienation. And I have 10 books at this point, and at least one of them, if not more, I go into detail about each of the 17 primary parental alienation strategies, what they are, examples, because a lot of people don't understand. They just kind of intuitively feel something's going on, but it doesn't mean they really understand each of the 17, what's a good example, what's not. Same thing with the 8 behavioral manifestations of alienation. Those were developed by Dr. Richard Gardner, who was a New Jersey-based psychiatrist. The names, the labels of his 8 behavioral manifestations are very catchy, but they're somewhat ambiguous. Like, what is the campaign of denigration? And what is weak, frivolous, and absurd, reasons? What is lack of ambivalence? What does that even mean? What is ambivalence? What is lack of ambivalence? So again, in more than one of my books, and if we had a lot of time, I could go through it now. And when I used to testify in court, I could spend hours talking about each of these things. But a lot of times, sadly, people just don't completely accurately understand. Even mental health professionals who are doing custody evaluations sometimes think the campaign of denigration is something the alienating parent does. Oh, and if they're not bad-mouthing the other parent, then it can't be alienation, but that's actually true. The campaign of denigration is one of the 8 behavioral manifestations of the child. So if all 5 factors are present, there's a breach in the relationship, there was a positive prior relationship, there's absence of anything that would cause the child to reject them, plus there's evidence that the other parent is doing the very things that cause disaffection between a parent and child, and the child's actually exhibiting all the hallmark behaviors of alienation, then it's alienation.
That is so helpful for our listeners to understand. And I know that there's so many stepmoms that I come in contact with and that I end up working with that talk about, the ex-spouse engaging in parental alienation, and whether it's alienation or interference, there's something going on. From a step-parent's point of view, how can they engage in a way that helps, a child that's caught in the middle of all this without overstepping?
Yeah. So I guess I have 2 main thoughts. The first is, I don't know, maybe it's 3 thoughts, but the first is in terms of your relationship with the dad, presumably. I mean, it could be another woman, but let's just say the rejected parent. In terms of a relationship with the rejected parent, I think your main job is to be supportive. Don't tell them to put their foot down and stop letting the child walk all over them. Don't make them feel badly for bending over backwards to accommodate what appears to be a rude, entitled child. Unless you're living this, you can't really know exactly how high the stakes can feel. And many targeted parents do have to modify their parenting from the ideal, which might be, chores and consequences and, things like that, to being more flexible. You don't get to be your ideal version of a parent when you're in an alienation situation, because you just have to be much more careful and your parental authority is being eroded. So the main thing the step parent can do is just accept that this is not parenting as usual. And if you have your own kids, you get to do what you want with them, but the targeted parent gets to do what they want with their child. And they shouldn't be made to feel badly or ashamed that they're being more permissive than maybe you want them to be or you think they should be. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think step parents should engage in any kind of discipline or consequences with the child, because then that can, I don't think a step parent wants to be in that situation of being blamed for everything, right? Everybody then sort of just, it's because the stepmom was so mean. And I think that can really cause some harm to the relationship, the spousal relationship, because you don't want that person blaming you because you overstepped.
And research shows that step parents should not. I mean, Patricia Papernow talks about it, all the time. Like, step parents just shouldn't engage in discipline. They need to focus on building the bond and, connection before correction and all of that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's right in line.
And it's just like, just turn up the dial to,
Mhm.
100 if it's alienation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree. It's about a relationship. And it's really about letting the other parent make the decisions. And I really feel for step parents because so much energy goes into managing a PA situation.
Yeah.
Time, money, focus. And, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you feel for them and you see how this is hurting them, but also there might be resentment. Like, why do you get to spend $100,000 on legal fees, but we have kids together that we can't take on vacation or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alienation trumps everything. That's all I can say. It's like, you just have to, I think, accept the reality. I mean, I was just talking to a dad the other day who said, he had tickets to some great show that he and his girlfriend had been like, so excited and looking forward to on her birthday, whatever. But the kid this dad sees like twice a year called and said, "Hey, I'm free for the next hour." And the dad dropped everything to be with his kid.
Yeah.
And I said, I hope your girlfriend understands because this is the reality that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just is a really complicated, difficult dynamic. And it's complicated and difficult anyway, but adding this to it is just a whole nother level. How often are these damaged relationships repaired when the kids become adults?
We don't have any prevalence data. You'd have to do a kind of study that we don't have the money for. There are very few PA researchers out there. I don't really do it anymore because I did pretty much all the research I did was kind of on my own nickel. I did everything myself. I didn't get external funding except for one study because there's so much controversy around the term that it's very hard to get funders to want to do it, to be associated with it. So you would need a very different kind of study to know. But I don't actually think that's helpful to know, or I accept the reality that we don't know. What I do know is some of these kids come around, and that what makes it easier for them to come around are various things that I talk about in my coaching sessions with my clients. Like, I can't say, I promise you that this will work, but I can promise you that this is the right thing to do, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you did the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I think for so many parents put in this situation, that's half of it is just really feeling like they have the knowledge that they've done everything they can do. And then they can be at peace with that and not be so attached to the outcome, even though it is heartbreaking.
Yep. Right. You have to have some hope that what you're doing is going to make a difference, but it can't be you also have to live with the reality that you don't know, which is how most people have to deal with most things that we want. The outcome is uncertain, but the path is clear, and that's, you're lucky. We do know a lot about what helps parents in this situation.
I love this conversation so much. This is so helpful for all of the stepmoms that I work with and that are listening. Thank you so much for your time, and tell everybody, you coach, where can folks find you if they're listening to this and saying, oh my gosh, I have to work with Dr. Baker?
Well, I have a website. That's the easiest place. And it's my name, amyjlbaker.com. And people can just contact me through first going to my website and then sending me an email.
Amazing. And I will put a link to your website in the show notes, as well as links to your books, because you have put out in the world so many valuable tools for people who are dealing with this situation, and it is so challenging. So thank you for all of your work and for being here today. I really appreciate the conversation. This was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pleasure chatting.
If this episode spoke to you or touched your heart, would you do me a favor? Take 10 seconds to go and follow the show, leave us a 5-star review, and share this episode with another stepmom who might need to hear it. Your support is going to help grow our blended family community, and you never know whose life you might change.